Welcome back, and we're moving into our first conversation this morning with attorney at law Audrey Matura. Good morning and welcome back.
Thank you.
It's always nice to have you in, especially now on a conversation such as marriage, divorce, and matrimonial property rights. There's so many sides to this, and a lot of folks are actually, it's actually a reality that people are actually going through it. Marlene mentioned, though, that it's actually a continuation of that conversation. Yes. And so we continue with that conversation.
You know, I found it interesting that the next topic we'll do from this show, you all do,
yes,
I do.
I do.
Yes, do I do. And I always say it's before you get married. Mm-hmm. Go sit with an attorney and know what your rights are. Both the spouses, the husband and the wife to be. Mm-hmm. Because you need to know this contract you're getting into, because marriage is a contract. Mm-hmm. But it's also tricky because a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't get married, so I don't have to worry about that. But our law now says that once you live with a female for 5 years or more, it's cemented. It's just like a marriage. He or she has almost every right a married person will have. Mm-hmm. So this basis is once you're getting into a committed relationship, know your rights. Yeah. And it's amazing the amount of things I've seen, and I think it's things that could have been avoided had people known what their rights are. Because in every relationship when you start, oh, it's sweet.
I was gonna
sweet
say.
Betsy, right? And loving Josie.
And I think that's we took your advice. That's why we made sure this segment came before those who are looking to get married. But I think you're right. When you are in a relationship and you're in your honeymoon phase, as they call it, and you really believe in the absolute best of the person that you're with, and you decide to get married, it's still like a la land phase, and yes. Then years later, and for some a few, and for some many years later, you run into problems that obviously no longer make the marriage something that one or both of you want, and then you learn what you have committed yourself to.
Yes, and so the way I look at it from a strictly legal point of view is that while I cannot do anything about the emotional turmoil you'll go through, I can do a lot to tell you that during that emotional turmoil, you will also be facing issues such as who stays in the matrimonial home, things such as maintenance rights for either party, custody of children, property rights, and even grounds and basis for divorce if you're married. Yeah. And those are things that if you already prepare for them, that emotional turmoil you will go through will be less. Because imagine going through that emotional turmoil about the emotional connection with your partner, and then also having to deal with the fact that, darn, I signed this mortgage and now he put me out of the house because the land is in his name, and it's my salary that is committed. Like, those are some of the hugest mistakes I see. Yeah. And women do that a lot. Yeah. And they don't get their name on these documents. So let me start in an orderly fashion. Okay. So first, I think that one of the things that I see most prevalent that I wish people would be able to avoid is the issue of property rights. Okay. So when you get married, anything you owned before the marriage is yours. So I'll keep using both of you as an example. So you two get married. Marlene already had 10 acres of land and you already had 5. If you're going through a divorce, that 5 is yours, that 10 is yours. However, if you all decided to build a matrimonial home on part of that 10 acres, she can't say, well, everything is mine. People say, oh, land claim house. But no, because you'd be able to show that she never worked, or maybe she worked, but you're the one who put your salary towards building this house, you may have portion of that house, the interest in that house declared. It doesn't mean that they'll give you a piece of the house, you know. They would estimate a value or a portion which you can have declared in your favor. But interestingly, many spouses, it happens a lot of time, and there are quite a few men who say, you know what, my wife could have that because after all, our children live in it, I don't mind. Or there are men that say, it's in my name and everything, but it's for my children, so my wife could have it, and they don't fight for it. But there are those who like the relationship so bad. They fight till the bitter end, and these are the ones that are the worst, where the wife, and sadly many times, it's like 99% of the times, it's the women who suffer. Because the women are the one who end up with the children, and the women are the one who need stability with the children, and then the men have the upper hand, and many times they're the ones who provide more. Yeah. But there are instances where women carry the home totally, and the man has really not done much. However, the worst situation is that I have found is where they get married, The house, they decided let's buy a house, and so they put it, let's say, in the husband's name, because the husband makes more money, and the bank is saying, okay, it's best to put it in one person's name. However, we need an extra salary, so the wife commits her salary as well. So both money is coming out from both accounts. But legally, the property is in the husband's name. There's a separation now. It doesn't mean that legally the wife doesn't have rights that can be declared, but it takes some time to go through the court. And many times the women go to the police station to get help, and then the police, in their limited ability, look at the document and say, look, but it's the husband's name that is on it. I can't put him out. And so you'd have to go to court, have those rights declared, or try and seek a protection order and get an occupation order. It doesn't mean you own it. You'll only get to occupy it. But the problem is usually bigger, because now it means that your salary, you the woman, your salary is committed already to that loan. And now you can't stop that salary from going in there, because the bank don't carry all your problems. You know, the bank just won't get paid. You realize, look, my name not even on the document. I'm helping to pay a mortgage, but my name is not even on the document. I'm not even joint owner. My husband has all the legal rights over this property. Where do I stand? And you can fight it, but the problem is that sometimes the emotional trauma is so much that you don't even have the energy to fight it. And the marriage is so volatile, or the relationship is so contentious that you can't even keep up that fight. And you walk away many times, but what do you do? Some women say, Miss, I just need one piece of mind. I feel like I'm going crazy. And they walk away, but walking away doesn't mean that you get back your money. It keeps going into that mortgage. Walking away doesn't mean that at some point you still need to have that property right declared. And I find many women just leave it for years, for years. The man has moved on with another woman, has a sweetheart living in there, they're still legally married, and she cannot get her salary removed from that. And they go to you and they say, well, I don't even have the money to pay an attorney. I have to go to court every minute and fight with him for maintenance. So I'm not even getting maintenance for the children. And it seems unreal, but there are literally many women going through this as we speak in this country, and they just give up. You know,
divorces can be nasty, and I think that's one thing. If you've ever known anybody who's gone through a divorce, you know, the love is strong, and the hate in the end sometimes seems even stronger.
Not equally strong, or stronger indeed.
And I've heard a lot of what you have said, which is, you know what, I don't even want to bother. I want to move on with my life. And you know, I wanted to because we just mentioned, you know, this is something I think that is so important for people to know. If someone is getting married, what is your advice to them about what? Because it's hard to think of how nasty a person can be in the end if you've never seen it up to that point. So how does one protect themselves? For applicants of our wedding show, for anybody, wedding season is coming up in December. What can they do to ensure they're protected?
Several things. One, when it comes to getting any property, insist and make sure your name is on the document. Once it's jointly, you're being fair. He put in, you put in. Neither of you can just push the other out. Make sure your name is on that document, especially if you're going to be contributing financially directly. Although when we discuss later, you'll find out that even when the woman or the man puts in financially directly, but he is there helping in another capacity, the court looks at that. So that's the first thing, your name on the document. The second one is that many people don't know that when they go to the bank to get a loan, especially as partners, be it common law or marriage, that they really need independent legal advice. No bank should give a spouse or a couple a loan without the husband getting his own attorney to advise him whether that's a good agreement to go into, and the wife getting an attorney equally. Because if you don't do that, there's actually case law where then you can take the bank to court, because the court, they should have understood that, look, this is a matrimony, this is joint interest. I cannot make one have leverage over the other. But many times, I remember there was a lady that came to me and she said, Miss, just write the letter. I know mine help my husband. I said, Miss, My advice to you is don't do that because of how the whole transaction. I said, don't do it. She says, I just need to make you write a letter and tell her no, because that's not my advice. You want me to for you to just take it to the bank. I said, you're making a mistake. The reason that bank sent you to get independent legal advice is for you to understand what you're getting into. And in her case, it was most of her salary would have gone to pay the loan. She was helping her husband to get the loan, mortgaging her property so that he can start a business. So her property, not matrimonial property, would have been the collateral. And while she said, oh, but my husband and not like that, I've seen so many instances, I had to tell her that is not a good idea. Absolutely. That you put your property as collateral. You also are putting towards the loan. He's not even putting you in the company that he's starting, and you're going ahead with that. That's like the worst thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's the second thing you can do. Make sure that apart from your name being on the document, that you always get independent legal advice. The third thing is your salary might be your only income. Please, whatever you do, when you look at what you can commit, calculate what is reasonable, that if things would go bad, you could live without that. You can survive without that. So let's say you make $2,000 a month, and you know you need $1,500 to live on. Okay. Make sure that the $500 that you're committing to anything, until that fight over money ends, that you can make it through without that $500. Now, I know I'm saying realistic, and some people will not want to do that, but if you do have the sense of presence, that's what you should do. Do not commit all your money to an venture like that. The other thing you can do is that if you're getting into a marriage, too often people get married and they don't want to talk about money before they get married. You have to have the conversation about money.
In general, people are uncomfortable talking about money, but this is absolutely important. And again, I go back to it, that in that beginning phase, I think people don't want to hurt anybody or to say, I'm getting into this marriage thinking of what will happen if it ends or when it ends.
So on the issue of money, I strongly advise that you have two accounts. A joint account with you and your spouse, because that will go towards, that will show a pattern that both of you have access to each other's money, and that's to run a house and take care of the children and things. And also both have your own small savings account that is yours alone. You need to have a backup plan, because let me tell you, when the relationship goes bad, and many relationships do go bad, the only thing that you will have to pull you through is money. Because the love gone. Some of your relatives don't talk to you anymore. Some of your friends don't talk to you. Sometimes the same relative or friend, they have one relationship with your wife or husband. So the family is torn. So make sure you always discuss, okay, babes, we have one joint account, and this is how much of my money that's going there, and this is how much, and this is how we manage it. And talking about that, many times I find that there are women who say, my husband will manage everything, so they don't even know what's happening on the bank account.
They want to take care of money, and I have to see.
It's amazing. So men are the ones who make sure that all the groceries are bought, all the bills are paid, and so on.
Or they ask for the money to be
suddenly
able
the
to
husband dies or the relationship dies, and they have not a clue how to even access the account, how to pay the bill. Learn to be independent. Even if you won't take it over, have electronic access now online to just check, keep tabs. And then the other thing, I could advise you many things, right? But the other one where I'll stop is learn to keep receipts. Learn to keep records. Keep texts, keep emails. It's a business transaction. Marriage is a business transaction. Get that through your head. It's a business transaction. Any business transaction you would go through, you would have done a business account, you would have kept receipts, you would have kept files, and so. And I'm just being very practical. I'm telling you, do these things, not because you're getting married to plan for the marriage to end, but because you're getting married and you want to make your business contract that you're getting into flow smoothly. Imagine, I'm giving this advice, but this advice is equally good for when the marriage doesn't end in divorce, but ends when one of the spouse dies, and you remain clueless. Miss, I didn't even know when my husband owned. Miss, I can't tell you this. But it's amazing. And their whole life fall apart. And so you must deal with that. But I know the itch to ask me something.
Because you know,
like, I keep something with affect you, know.
It is, like I mentioned at the start, this topic is very wide, and we are seeing trends now whereby, because you mentioned a lot of stuff that I've got so much in my mind, to the fact that sometimes, or the wife is not working, but the husband is. And they do get into this marriage and the property and the, but at this particular point now, at today's day and age, in most cases, both of them are working.
Yes.
Are we seeing a trend, a heavily divorced trend right now in this country? Are we seeing it?
Yeah, we are. We are seeing more divorces. And I don't take that as a bad sign. I think it as a good sign.
Why not?
Because if you're in a relationship, think about it as a business partnership and it's not working, why would you only have one life to live? Why would you stay in such misery?
Yeah.
And then many women say, oh, I stay because of my kids. Hello, you're teaching your kids how to have unhealthy relationships. You don't do that. Because you've been around relatives and friends that have such contention. And those poor kids slap up each other, cuss up each other, fight with each other. What do you think those kids are going through?
And that's the nicer version, because there are women who stay living in abuse of all kinds. And even, we didn't touch on it, and this is why the business contract is so important, financial abuse, where someone holds the purse over your head and you can't do anything. But I tend to agree with you on that one. It's better to know people are leaving with some kind of dignity rather than staying because of perceptions or because they feel they're somehow doing some favor to their children.
Yes, and it's good to go into a marriage. When you go, enjoy it. But when it's not working, your mental sanity and health is important, and so is the health of your children. And what I keep telling people that we don't want to see in this country is that we've become accustomed to a level of abuse in our immediate surrounding, because that's abuse that the children are seeing. We want to limit abuse to a slap and cuss. No. That emotional and psychological and financial abuse that child sees affects him or her. And she then becomes, or he then becomes, a product of abuse. And what kind of relationship you think they will develop? And then you wonder, well, why is my daughter getting pregnant so young? Or why are they taking drugs? Why are they drinking? Why are they partying?
Why is she with that man?
Yeah.
They learned it at home. So I don't think divorce is a bad thing. I know those that deal with the churches will jump and say, oh, whatever. That's a moral issue, and I respect that. But even at church, I always tell clients who are fanatic religious clients I've had, I said, look, the God you serve did not create you to suffer. I said, because what you're doing, you're taking Jesus off that cross and you're putting there yourself when he already died for your sins. Why would you crucify yourself? And many times I tell people, when you separate, you'd be amazed that after some time you actually have a healthier relationship. And what you're doing, you're demanding your respect as an individual. And there's some men who never have that, and there's some women so bitter they never have that. But we need to learn to enter into relationships. When you work, and it doesn't find nice or as comfortable a way to move away. If we learn to do that in our personal lives as people, we'll be able to do that in our wider community. And also, believe it or not, once we can manage ourselves like that emotionally, we'll be able to even hold our governments to be transparent, because we've learned from our very most intimate and personal level of life how to deal with people, how to deal with conflict, how to resolve issues.
Or touchy matters.
Yes, but if I wrote an article about 2 weeks ago where I said we have a very abused and abusive society. And our abuse stems from our home right into our political system of governance.
One of the things you touched on that sticks with me as well is the fact of couples not getting legal advice before they step into marriage. Now again, how important is this? Now I'm saying this because we can see the trend now. It's very trendy of how you meet people. People are connecting from all walks of life. And like it's much more easier for them to get in a relationship, but they're not seeking that advice. Now how important is this for them to get
extremely important. Let me tell you simple things that people don't know. The law says, the Families and Children's Act says that if you get involved with Marlene and Marlene already had children, you can be sued to maintain those children. And Marlene likewise, if she gets involved with a man and that man has children, she can be sued to maintain those children as well.
And this goes for marriage and common law?
And common law, and common law. And another thing that you need to think about when you're getting in, why it's important, because when you're getting into a relationship, everything may seem fine and dandy, but there's basic things you might not realize that it will affect. For example, if you decide to adopt because you can't have kids, you need to understand, okay, what are the rights of those children in an adoption, and if there's a separation, what are their rights and who has rights over the child. If you get into a relationship and you already have kids, but this child grew up as and knows only this man as the father, then you vex with the man and suddenly, that's not the real pa, whatever. The court not care about that. That's the only person the child knows as a father. He has rights as a father. Or something as simple as, people don't know that once you've made a will, I make a will, I'm not married yet, but the mere act of marriage nullifies that will the very day I sign my marriage certificate. Because a will that is done before marriage is destroyed by marriage, because the law assumes that when you got married, you would have intended to share or provide for in your will for your new spouse. Except if you do that will in contemplation of marriage, and you would state it in contemplation of marriage, I'm making this will, meaning that even after I'm married, I want this. It's also important because many people come into a relationship already having had a previous marriage, already having had previous children, already having previous assets. And you need to decide, okay, how do I deal with this? How do I manage this? What right this person may have over it? What if I give her as a gift? What if I just make her use it? You need to know that. It's also important because you said something critical, that what if she hasn't worked? She hasn't worked. And the old days, in the very old days, if the woman didn't work, many times she left that marriage with nothing. But the law changed, I think it was like since 2000 or before. Don't quote me on the exact year, but definitely by 2000, where it recognized the woman's work in the home as equal currency as the physical money the man brings into the home. And that gives her rights then. When she gives up her career to be able to help you progress with yours, when she decides to be a stay-at-home mom, and so she's the one who carries the children every 9 months, well, and if we don't have 10, that done 90 months her life. When she's the one who washes, who cooks, who ferries the children back and forth from school, she has rights. And she even has more when she does all of that, plus she works.
Now, let's talk about common law, because I think we do, and this is really one where I think people feel like, well, it's not legal, so I'm walking away, I really have nothing. What does the law provide for a person? And what are some of the things that you would recommend to people if they are entering into a cohabitating relationship?
Oh, man, I love that topic. I just love it because I'm tired of
because many people avoid the marriage for the legality of it, but now common law is enshrined in the law.
Well, there's two aspects to it that really bothers me. One is that people say, oh, he's not my common law husband, but he's still legally married to someone else. And just last week I wrote about that. I actually met a lady 20 years with this gentleman.
Common law.
He was, because he was still legally married. She thought she was in a common law relationship, but he was still legally married. You can never accrue common law rights when one of the parties are still married. So if the lady is still married and they don't want to get one divorce, or for some reason they didn't put an interest in it, no common law rights accrue. You remain just two single people living together, two individuals living together as either partners, mistress, lovers, girlfriend, boyfriend, call it whatever, but it is not a common law. So
you have to be sure the person you're with is single, as defined by the law, not married or divorced.
And thus, in that situation, if he's saying, well, I don't want to get a divorce, or I don't want to go through that, or we don't have money, make sure that whatever you do with him, your name is there. Because you will have no common law rights accruing. You can't say, oh, well, I worked with him so many years and it's my interest as common law wife. You cannot use the law of common law. You might be able to use the law of equity where you show that you did so much. For example, this lady I met clearly for 20 years, all the houses, the land and assets that he accrued. He could not have done that without her. She gave up her career to become a public officer. She gave up her career. She had his kids. She was by his side, working in the store, doing everything, but nothing was on her name. Her name wasn't on anything, and she did not even have access to the bank account. He did everything.
Wow.
So of course the wife could come and take over everything. She can eventually get the court to declare that while she doesn't have common law rights, she has equitable rights.
Which means I contributed towards what you've been able to
But what documentation you have to prove that? You have none. Because you've left everything up to him. So it's important that, just like in a marriage, make sure your name is there. Make sure you have some kind of way of tracking your interests, your records of what you've put in. Don't just be there. So that's very important.
We have a viewer question regarding a family home. If the couple moves into a family home, what the rights are?
Oh, meaning that it's a
family home of one of
them.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's rough. It's rough. You have no common law rights, you have no matrimonial rights, but you may have equitable rights. What does that mean? So, when the two get married and your parents love him so much, they say, "Oh, could go live in the family home, nice home and everything," and you start living there. And because you think things will always be good, you take your money and you start improve and you start do this and you start expand. And the thing is, what you were given and what you end up with is different. But you have no legal right to it, and he doesn't either, you know, because it's his parents' home, so you have no legal right. But if you keep receipts, and you know that's your whole life investment, and you could show where you made the various loans to improve that place, you can have your equitable right declared. And that has nothing to do with the matrimony. That has everything to do with, look, this is a transaction that occurred where I can show that I put an interest in it, and the reason I put that interest is because they gave me permission, or they saw me do it and they didn't stop me. That's very important because it comes under the law of trust. There have been many cases where that has happened, I'm sure in Belize, but I know a lot of regional and international cases where it has happened. And many instances in those matrimonial home situations, the parent would have said to them, although they never transferred, the parent would have said to them on several times, "No man, that for oh no." Or no worry, if him dead, that you one could stay there with the kids. And those promises upon which you've acted to treat it as your own, you can then go to court to have your interest declared. And it's a very beautiful area of the law. I love it because it happens a lot. It's real life situation. Nothing, and not everything that is signed on document, yes, signed on document. Real life situation where they put you in that position, and then suddenly you find they want to put you, they're siding with their son or they're siding with their daughter. You've put everything you have in there, and they're putting you out now because they've picked sides, and this is what you know as a matrimonial home. And the husband says, "I know, because I know you know they're in my name, so she can't get it." And sometimes they intentionally do that so that you could never get anything. But so if you are smart
receipts,
and you have the bank records where you made the loan, you show that you work, you have receipts, you can't go wrong.
Audrey, men keep on saying, well, you'll hear this a lot. The laws always favor women. They continue to say this. But so what if there are reverse rules whereby the man is not working and he stays home, he takes care of the home, he takes care of the kids.
He has the exact same rights. Yeah. Exact same rights, and that has been happening a lot.
Well,
there are a lot of men being maintained, so it's the exact rights. But you are right. I would say, from my experience, looking at legislation, many laws are a bit more in favor of the woman. But you have to look at the different roles, why that is, and whether we want to accept it or not. Generally, the person who stays with the children and carries the burden, and I don't mean it in a bad sense, of having to raise the children, are the women. Of course, there are exceptional men I've met that do that. I mean, I tip my hat off to them. There are great men. I don't want the men to think we think less of them. But the reality is, statistically, it's the women that are the ones who usually take charge and do those things.
So we spoke about being able to get some kind of legal consultation prior to your marriage, ensuring that you are involved in whatever property you may purchase or acquire following the marriage. Now, what about financial obligations? What about signing loans, co-signing loans with your spouse, and then being stuck? We know stories of people who sign off on a mortgage for the home, and then the marriage falls apart and he stops paying.
Yeah, you need. That is why I said, when you get that advice before marriage, that has to be one of the areas you cover. But I also told you, the minute you're going into some transaction with any bank, you need to get independent legal advice. You need to understand the implication of that. Because if you don't, you will be the one who, at the end of the day, will suffer the detriment. And money is just money. But the reality is, you need it. You need it to put the kids through school. You need it to
feed them,
feed yourself. You need it to go to the psychiatrist and get some therapy after everything that's happening. You need the money.
Even to pay for your divorce.
even, oh, it's so ironic because this is one of the things that he said, that the law is most skewed towards the woman.
Yeah.
It's often the men. The law allows that you ask that he pays your divorce. There's provision where you can ask the men to pay the legal costs, and many women don't know that, or they don't do that. But you know why too you need to get legal advice before you get married? There's this little clincher, right, that people don't know. Well, several little ones, but two of the ones that excite me that people don't know is that when you get married and things go bad before 3 years,
You can't get fit.
you cannot apply for a divorce before 3 years, except, there's always an except with law. You can show the hardship of remaining married. For example, I had a case with a young man, and he barely 1 year married, but that was an abusive marriage. And he had to get separated, and now, Miss Audrey, I want to get divorced. I know. I said, but Papa, you can't get the divorce. What hardship you will show? Other than that, you all can't get along. But then I had another case where the hardship would have been that the person was married to someone from abroad. That person didn't want to help fill out documents to make that person get citizenship of that country. But because he didn't do that for her, she couldn't go there legally, but she also wanted to go and study there. And she couldn't get a visa because of certain provisions, and it would have been best that she is divorced so that then she gets a student visa, since he doesn't want to do what is right for her. So that would be some kind of hardship. The other clincher, which is very important, is that marriage, the wedding is the day you sign the document.
Yeah.
And everybody partners. So you know what seals the marriage? The first time you have sexual intercourse after you sign that document.
Wow.
If there's not consummation of the relationship, there's no marriage. And I've had few instances, this is crazy, but since I've been practicing, I've had actually 3 cases where the young woman met some guy, usually in the military or coming here to do business, and the euphoria, and they got married and everything, but for some reason, they say, he had to travel, and there was no consummation of the marriage. Once you could prove that there was no sexual intercourse, there's not a lawful marriage, and you can seek an annulment instead of seeking a divorce. And so that's why I keep telling people.
Deep.
It is.
There you go.
Think about, let's go back to the biblical days. Did you see they sign any document? They always went into the tent and they suggested
Well,
that
I was
something
going
happened.
to say, yeah, with like tribal representation of a marriage, the entire village watches you go consummate your marriage.
Because it's the consummation that makes the marriage. That is why adultery is a basis upon which you can get a divorce.
I am still stuck on the
What you stuck on?
I'm still
John,
stuck on
just
the
go
fact
get married,
that
man. Don't worry about it.
I'm still stuck on the fact though that if you're not happy in a relationship, in this marriage, for you've been married and then 3 years has to pass before you get a divorce. Why is this? It's stuck within me,
That's
and a lot of
honestly
people
the
might
law.
have the
That's-
same
It's
question.
actually there.
Why is that?
I don't have the historical perspective myself. But in the old days, the reason why we go from decree nisi to decree absolute when we do that divorce, nisi I mean it's like, okay, we are considered the divorce. Absolute is like, okay, definitely, and they give you a waiting period. It's usually because they believe that there's a chance of reconciliation. But my belief is different. I've done enough divorce to tell you that when that person walks in through my door, that marriage did not end then. A marriage does not end when one incident happened. That was already on the breakdown path, and that incident just sealed the deal, right? So I believe it's an unjust provision in our law, but the amendments I hope will come soon. Our laws are a bit antiquated. It is still fault-based in this day and age of reality. It should not be fault-based, I believe. Because when you decide to have a divorce, trust me, at least in the culture that I've seen here, that woman has done everything to make that marriage work. And he said, like, this is it, Papito, this is it.
And, I think if you were to look at it another way, it's also one way for you to take it more serious. If you know you can't get out for 3 years, at least that makes you have some additional
That's
thought
a good
before
way.
the commitment.
That's a good way to look at
Because
it.
you will be stuck for 3 years.
And so I think one of the things you also need to know before you get married are the grounds for divorce.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
This is the reason
So
for
that you
legal
don't do
advice.
it.
Audrey,
So that
this
you
is
don't do
really
it,
You
Legal
right?
have
advice.
engaged couples out there right now that are just turning off the TV, who
They
goes
pull off the
into
ring
a
and like,
marriage
I'm not getting
thinking
married.
about a divorce. And,
You have to think about it.
I've heard horror stories. You've heard far more. Everybody who's listening has heard horror stories. So I appreciate what you're saying. You have to go into it. Yes, the love is there, but somehow reconnect with your brain for a second to prepare yourself.
Yes, you have to.
What would I want to touch on this issue. We're about to enter, in a month's time, 16 days of activism. And I think one of the things when we talk about gender-based abuse, I know we're running out of time very quickly.
We have a few more minutes.
It's financial abuse. And some of the things that you're talking about is that some women enter a marriage and some of them set themselves up for financial abuse. Talk to us about being able to ensure that you have your own rights to money, to access to money, whatever it is, so that you don't become dependent on begging. I mean, we hear stories where people have to ask for $5 to cover the cost of something, personal hygiene items.
The minute you have to get into that situation, that's a marriage you should not enter into.
Yeah.
That's a relationship you should not enter into. But of course, it's easier for us to say, especially if we are independent women that would find our own means. The reality is not many women are like that. So I think people need to understand financial abuse. Financial abuse simply means where the person uses money as a leverage to keep you in a relationship, or the person uses money as a leverage to control what you get or don't get in the marriage. For example, or in the relationship, because it happens in common law as well. For example, the lady would say, I won't even bother take him to court for maintenance for the kids that need to go through school because he won't give me any money. I know he will quit his job or he will do this or that. So he would say to her, well, let me tell you, as long as you date me, I will give you money. If you not date me, you get money. And sometimes it goes farther. I will give you the money, but you must have sexual intercourse with me. So many women are going through a lot of marital rape. It is happening, and we've not had one case reported and convicted in this country, but yet it's a part of our law. So what do you do not to put yourself in that situation? That's a very tough question coming from a legal perspective, because the fact that you're prepared to put yourself in a relationship and give up everything that you have or could have possibly have means that you already come from an abused background and you're prepared now to subject yourself. I can tell you at that point, please, you need to go see a psychiatrist, because you're getting into a bad situation. You are. That is the truth, and I'm not putting down anyone. It's the reality, because let me tell you, getting into a relationship with someone has to be that you're not signing up for a deal where I'll be unhappy. I keep telling myself personally, like, I see so many cases and I'm like, my God, it cannot be that you get into a relationship to be unhappy, because then that is just so counterproductive, counterhuman, counterintuitive. It has to be that you get with someone because there are shared feelings, emotions, interests,
mutual respect,
things that you plan to do together. If you don't get into that, then there is no equality in the relationship, and that's a relationship you should not be in. Get out quick. Do not pass go, do not go to jail, just get out. Get out quick. So that's tough how not to set yourself up, because it's more than the legal. But if you find that you can have some kind of still leverage in the relationship, please make yourself part of his bank account. Please put yourself in a position where you have access to some level of control over the money. If the minute he does not allow that, you already know you're in a bad relationship, right? You are. And that's where the hardship of 3 years to wait for the marriage to end is really impacting you, because now you don't realize you go through this financial abuse. You want to leave the marriage, but you can't before the 3 years. Maybe you could plead that that's the hardship. But the difference is, if you are in such a situation, at the family court you can actually go and claim for financial abuse as a form of domestic violence. Sadly, we have these things in the law, and I don't think the family court knows how to handle it. They still deal with domestic violence in a very limited sense. I notice when I appear before them, there's a limited way how they see what is emotional and psychological and financial abuse, right? And so they don't want to declare that there's abuse, or they don't want to give an occupation order. And I think that's because the system has failed them to untrain them to understand this concept, because it's not an easily grasped concept, like them bat you, then beat you, then slap you, which is clear cut.
And that's a good point, because I know the common perception is that if you don't have proof of the abuse, pictures of the bruises, scars to be able to show, never went in to make a report, that you can't prove domestic violence. Is that the case?
That's the case when you look at it very limited. That's the very superficial way, but I don't believe that's the case. You can go to a therapist. A trained therapist will be a person who will then make sure that he or she can hear you out in different sessions. And with that training, they can tell you that there is some level of abuse. Because all abuse, I opine, after doing many cases, and I'm not the guru and the expert, but all abuse, no matter what kind it is, always have an element of psychological abuse. The fact that he keeps beating you in and of itself may be the physical abuse, but it has a psychological impact. So there is psychological abuse to it, right? And so I still believe you can prove anyone. Unfortunately, the easier one to prove in our court system, because for some reason our decision makers are limited or caught only and easily can grasp that, is the physical abuse. But the psychological abuse is the most prevalent.
So a psychologist can help you prove your case.
You can. You need to do it. And that's what the problem in this society is, because we have this idea that, oh, if you go see one therapist or one psychologist, you're crazy. And so we stay away. And that's one of the myths I would hope that they would have been trying to debunk. And I think we're having Mental Health Week. It's very important. It's a real issue. A human being is not only flesh. As a matter of fact, the most powerful aspect of us is our mind. And that is, once they break that down, that is the worst abuse you could go through. So when you see women, or even men, but mostly women, stay in a relationship that you on the outside go like, why does she take that? How could she? It's because the psychological abuse is so deep-seated that they can't recognize it. It's a mental trap that you on the outside can see, but they can't see, and that's why you have to go to a therapist.
You know,
so before we close off with doom and gloom. No, and you know, I think we have to be real and we have to be honest, and we always say that, you know, on the show with you, and so we know the things you have seen and explained to us, that this is very important information to people. So let's talk to our engaged couple once again. Let's talk to our happily in love couple who are looking forward to that marriage, or maybe people who have been in a common law relationship, delaying for a very long time, moving towards marriage because of the fear of the legalities.
Okay, let me tell you, I will tell any engaged person the following. 1, discuss your finances. You have to be clear about it. 2, you see that little thing called a cell phone? I think it has been the cause of many breakups and divorces. Why is that important? Because I've done many divorces, and our evidence come from the naked pictures and the explicit texts and the postings on Facebook. So make your rules about what that will be in the marriage. It doesn't mean that you don't have a right to privacy, but you have to have what your ethics and protocol will be when it comes to social media and your telephone. It has to be clear cut. And I won't tell you what that rule should be. You decide for yourself. But in my book, it should be an open rule. You have nothing to hide, I have nothing to hide. Because remember, one of the bases for divorce is cruelty, and you being emotionally involved with someone else and not emotionally available for your spouse is a level of cruelty. It's the basis for divorce. So I think that this is one of the things that you need to be clear cut about. 2, you need to discuss about children, how many children you have, how you maintain them or not. It is just like the obvious, but they don't discuss it. You have to have a discussion over that and make a plan. When are we going to have kids? How many kids are we going to have? Are we going to work a while first? Are we going to try and get a house first? Those are practical decisions you need to make. Don't say, I'm so in love, it will just happen. Even where you will live, you have to make that decision. The other thing that you need to decide on is how you deal with both families. Because they are basis for divorce too, you know. Family interference, oh my Lord, that it's like crazy. And so you as a couple need to decide like, hey, I love your mom, but she can't come stay with us more than a week, you know. Or I love your dad, but he can't come and live with us. Or I love your little sister, and she can stay here maybe a year when she's going through high school. You need to make these rules. So you need to make rules about family, but you also need to make rules about friends.
Yeah.
And the rules to me when it comes to friends is very simple. You and I have a relationship. You're entitled to your friends, I'm entitled to my friends. My world didn't end when I marry you. But you need to know what is the kind of respect, because while it may seem like a social issue, those are the very issues that impact on your grounds for divorce thereafter, right?
Yeah.
Where, oh, he will spend every weekend or drink with the boys, and he neglect me. That is abandonment of your spouse. That is a level of cruelty in your marriage. And so you need to have these conversations. So you also need to discuss past girlfriend and boyfriend, how you can deal with that. Because many times,
What
you
level
laugh
of
like,
friendship?
am I
What
touching
level
something?
of friendship?
Yes, it's true. These are the things, because those are the things that eventually lead to a breakdown of the marriage. So you need to talk about that. You need to talk about health issues, about insurance.
About death?
Even about
Yeah.
death. Will I make a will or not? And the thing with death is very important, because if you have children, one of the things you can put in your will is who should be the guardian of those children. If one of you should die or both of you should die. And many people don't realize that in a will, it's not only to give your car and your house and your money, but you can also declare who's going to be the guardian of your children.
You know, I smile because of the actual reality
You
of these
smile
things.
because you are see me
know.
for consultation.
But I think the long and short to this situation is actually make sure that you get legal advice before you get into marriage.
Do it. And let me tell you, there's this wonderful book. No, I didn't write it, but it's the Women's Department, and it was published in 2008. You can actually find it online.
What's the name of it?
Women's
Can't see
rights.
it.
Women's Rights. It came from a women's department, so it's more skewed towards the woman.
Yeah.
But honestly, you are the weaker sex in a relationship. I believe in equality, you know, but I will always accept, yes, you're more at a disadvantage. Our society is still very patriarchal.
Yes.
And women, oh, you don't know because you're not us. We know what we go through. So you need to know your rights. Because when the standard of a woman raises, the standard of your society raises.
Absolutely.
Your society is only as strong as your weakest. And your weakest is your woman who then takes care and nurtures her children. So it's not to put anything against men. I love men. I think they're great men. I've met wonderful
And we need
men.
them in our society. It's not,
And
it's
they're
not about
part of our
exclusion.
society,
Yeah.
but there are certain disadvantages that by the mere fact that you're female, you go through.
Yeah.
And so you need to know your rights. And while men can pick up and bunk it out anywhere, when you have 2-3 picnic for log, your cousin only make you sit up with she house so much.
Yeah.
Many times you say man, you pass and you go right back to your husband and
Yes.
you pick him, you
Yes.
will live that through.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be, right? So it's important to have these things. No, next time we can talk about grounds for divorce. I want to go into that, but I can't go into that
We
right
can't
now.
do it today, and we have to move into some of the family court issues, maintenance, and some of the other challenges that women face after the divorce in trying to
Or
get...
during the divorce. But that's a whole topic by itself.
I know.
There you go.
I agree with you, and there are many people who neglect their responsibilities, and I think, we'll get to that one too.
We really need to discuss these issues, because while many things out there are important, if you don't get your immediate family, personal life in order, it's very difficult for you to get the rest in order. And when I talk as an attorney, I talk from personal experience too. I know the director of family court always says, I like you, because you not only come with the legal experience, you come from with the personal experience. And from personal experience, I like that I can share it. I'm not embarrassed about it. I mean, I've earned my stripes.
Of course.
I've earned my stripes. And so I try to advise people very practically, because this is one life you have to live. This is one moment you'll be in. This is your time to decide to be happy with someone or by yourself, and how to deal with it. It's just real. I want people to see it real like that. Don't worry about who want to talk about you. No worry about that.
They're talking
And-
won't feed you
and
or
I know
shelter you.
and I know we will soon finish, and I will say this about marriages and relationships, be it common law or be it legal marriage. When it reaches that point where you know it ended, I want everybody to know it did not end then. Nobody just wake up and, well, this marriage end.
And that's it,
That's
yeah.
not how it happens. There were signs along, and that's one of the things you should talk about before you get married. When you see these signs along, what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared for us to go to counseling? Are you prepared for us to get a legal separation legally, or just separate for a while? What are we prepared to do when we see these signs coming?
Yeah.
right? Because it's your life. How do you plan? In a business proposal, you plan for if you're not making enough sales, if you have to cut down on staff. So why in your life you wouldn't make that plan? You have to have that plan. You must notice, well, babes, I don't feel the same way. Are you all going to plan monthly? We must find one day together. I know great marriages, and the lady told me, every Friday night, my husband and I, no matter what, we have a date night. There's simple things, because a marriage is not just saying I do, from yes to I do. It's like the rest of my life I'm with you. And so how will I survive that? Because in marriages, you will change. I will change. You will change. We want different things. We grow differently. We grow spiritually. Our bodies change, and so it affects our moods. And you have to say, I'm going to stick with you because we have a plan.
Yeah.
Are you going to say, hell no, I can't take that. I'm out of here.
All right. Well, we appreciate the real talk this morning, and of course, grounded in the laws as well. So thank you so much for sharing this information. We know that quite a number of people perhaps have had some questions answered, and we promise to follow up with some of the other things that we didn't get to touch.
And so do I get the last little word in?
Yes, you do.
I had asked permission that as my last word, I just wanted to plug in that we have a group named Missing Person, Search and Rescue Belize. You can find it on Facebook. It's an organization I'm starting. Well, I started. I wanted to do it 10 years ago when my friends, 7 friends of mine went missing at sea. We only found one. November 4th will mark the 10th anniversary. Wow. And I see a lot of missing people right now. And so one of the persons we are trying to focus on finding is Mr. Mark Pollard. He went missing since the 3rd of October, 2017. And today is 109 days since he has gone missing. We have a reward of $1,000 right now, and it's a pledge for people to give us information. But we want to do 2 things. We want to organize new searches, and 2, we want to increase that reward. So please go on our Facebook page, contact us, inbox us, so that we can increase that reward. You don't have to give the money upfront. You can pledge it. We'll have you sign a pledge sheet. If the need comes for the money and you pledge $50, I'll go collect the $50 to put towards the reward. Right? That's how we'll start for now. So that's just my little plug-in.
That's fine.
Nothing to do with the marriage and
That's
divorce.
fine. We know you have multiple interests, and we appreciate you coming in this morning and having this conversation with us. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about Yes to I Do. So stay tuned.